On a beautiful island called La Palma, the sea was crystal blue, and the soft breeze carried the scent of salt. A small boat could be seen slowly sailing on the calm surface of the water. On the boat, a few tourists were enjoying their vacation. One of the female tourists, maybe a little too excited, decided to jump into the sea. A few seconds later, the calm water turned terrifying. The woman never came back to the surface. A week passed. The scene now shifted to a family that had just arrived on La Palma Island. They came for a vacation, just like the tourists before them. The family consisted of Frederick, the father, Jennifer, his wife, and their 2 children, Sarah and Tobias. On the first day of their vacation, they met Frederick's brother at the hotel where they were staying. It seemed they had planned it beforehand.
Har bare träna lite.
Ja, vi får nykte det. Ja, vi snakkes very much. Actually, the rental car, it should have...
After chatting for a bit, they went into their hotel room to rest.
For a special lady. Nej, det är kjempebra.
Brodd, alltså. Ända gott.
Meanwhile, at the BMKG office near La Palma Island, a man named Alvaro was reading the morning newspaper. On the front page, there was news about a boat accident that killed several tourists around the island. 2 bodies had been found, but the cause of their deaths was still unknown. Both were now at the hospital for autopsy.
La playa bonita. ¿Por qué? ¿Hay algún problema?
At the same office, a woman named Marie noticed something unusual. One of the underground activity detectors placed in a cave beneath the mountain had suddenly stopped working. Marie and her colleague immediately left for the site to check the equipment.
Early afternoon. I can see it.
When they entered the cave, the atmosphere felt damp and strange. Water was dripping heavily from the stone walls, while several dead bats were lying on the ground. When they reached the spot where the device was, they saw it was badly damaged, crushed by fallen rocks. Marie looked up and there was a huge crack in the cave ceiling. They immediately went back to the office to report their findings. One of Marie's colleagues, Hauke, then opened old archives, research data from 20 years ago by a British scientist. In those notes, there was a terrifying theory. If the mountain on La Palma Island ever erupted, there was a possibility that a 500-kilometer-wide slope could collapse into the sea. If that happened, a massive tsunami could form and sweep across a vast area.
So he's not going to do that. For it to happen, it would have to be the...
This volcano could one...
Alvaro, who led the BMKG office, grew more curious. He decided to go to the hospital to find out the autopsy results of the 2 tourists who were found dead. There, Alvaro heard a shocking result. The victims' lungs were filled with a large amount of carbon dioxide gas. On top of that, their bodies had burns indicating that the seawater at the time was extremely hot.
El agua tuvo que calentar tanto. Álvaro, ceniza. Todo esto.
Back to Frederick's family. In the afternoon, Sarah was seen walking alone around the hotel pool while her little brother Tobias was playing in the water. But a moment later, Frederick panicked. Tobias had suddenly disappeared from the pool.
Tobias?
Frederick ran in every direction, calling out his son's name. Not long after, Frederick met Sarah and her friend, who were also helping to look for him.
Tobias?
They finally found Tobias on the rocky shore. The boy looked frozen, staring at the sea with a terrified expression. When Frederick and Sarah got closer, they finally realized what had made Tobias so stunned. There was something in the sea that shouldn't have been there. Back at the BMKG office, the atmosphere felt tense. Marie, the woman who had been suspicious of the strange phenomena on the island from the start, kept studying the data she collected from the cave. She stared seriously at the computer screen, trying to piece together all the bits of information. From her observations, Marie began to notice something suspicious. The crack inside the cave was most likely directly connected to the mountain's peak. To confirm it, Marie took her colleague and went to the mountain area. After climbing quite a distance, they finally found what they were looking for, a massive crack stretching along the side of the mountain, clearly visible and extending as far as the eye could see. They quickly installed a crack monitoring device with an automatic sensor system. Once it was activated, the screen displayed a graph that kept shifting. At first, it moved slowly, but then the line started to rise gradually. The crack was widening, a sign that the ground was moving, slowly but surely. Seeing the results, Marie immediately panicked and called Alvaro to report what was happening. But at the office, Alvaro himself was watching satellite graphs showing movement in the mountain's activity. He realized that gas emissions could erupt at any moment. Without hesitation, Alvaro ordered both of them to leave the area immediately before it was too late.
You have to leave your equipment.
Run, come on!
A short while later, Marie woke up in the hospital. Her head felt heavy and her body was still weak. She was lucky to have suffered only minor injuries. Marie knew this wasn't the time to stay still. She quickly called her sister, asking her to leave La Palma Island right away. But her sister refused, saying she didn't want to leave such a beautiful island. Marie tried to explain firmly that this wasn't something to take lightly. Finally, Marie asked to meet later that night at home so she could explain everything in person. That afternoon, Alvaro came to visit Marie at the hospital. He brought a laptop containing the latest data from the device they had installed on the mountain. When he opened the screen, the graph showed a continuous rise. The crack was still widening, even though the movement was very slow and invisible to the human eye.
We don't know if and the consequences of being lose faith in us.
But even though it was slow, it was still a sign of serious danger. The two of them went to meet the president of the island, hoping to report their findings and request an evacuation order for everyone living around La Palma Island. But the president's reaction wasn't what they expected. With an irritated tone, the president rejected the request. She argued that if an evacuation was carried out without solid proof, it could cause public panic. She was afraid it would lead to chaos, looting, riots, and other criminal acts.
So, I'm sorry.
No, I don't think you are sorry.
Just...
Alvaro tried to convince her by showing all the data they had, explaining that the situation was truly serious. But the president remained stubborn. She said she would only announce an evacuation if the data was proven completely valid and not just an uncertain prediction. Even after a long discussion, Alvaro could clearly see from the president's expression that she had no intention of acting on the warning. The scene shifted to Frederick, who was enjoying his vacation with his family on La Palma Island. Their days were filled with laughter, good food, and the calming view of the ocean. Even Jennifer, his wife, looked so relaxed and supportive of anything that made their kids happy, including a small friendship that had started to grow between their child and someone they'd just met there. That afternoon, everything changed drastically. While relaxing by the hotel pool, Frederick looked toward the mountain in the distance. His face suddenly stiffened. The mountain was erupting. Thick black clouds rose high into the sky, followed by rumbling sounds that echoed all the way to the shore. A plane flying over La Palma crashed after entering the volcanic ash from the eruption. That incident finally made the president start to act on the warnings Alvaro had been giving all along. The government quickly held an emergency online meeting with Alvaro and his team. They agreed to prepare a tsunami warning for the people of La Palma. But deep down, Alvaro felt that this step might already be too late. Still, he kept pushing the government not to waste any more time. Alvaro urged them to stop arguing and take immediate action without getting caught up in bureaucracy.
Yes, but it is a risk to human life.
Turns from ash.
Without being prepared.
And do it now.
That night, Marie got a phone call from her family at home. There was panic in their voices. Without thinking twice, she rushed home. But when she arrived, she was faced with a completely different situation. Her sister was dealing with the police after being caught with a bottle of alcohol. Panicked and trying to defend her sister, Marie accidentally hit one of the officers while trying to explain. As a result, she was taken straight to the police station and charged with assaulting a government officer. That night, Marie had to wait in a cell until a lawyer came to get her out.
Okay.
Meanwhile, at the government headquarters, an emergency meeting was held to discuss the possibility of a major disaster on La Palma. The officials were ordered to keep all information secret to avoid causing public panic before an official announcement was made. However, among them was a man named Jens who looked uneasy and was clearly hiding something. His face showed that he didn't agree with the decision to cover up the truth.
Kan ta dager.
The story went back to Frederick's family, who were still trying to enjoy the rest of their vacation. They were swimming in the hotel pool, trying to ignore the bad news about the eruption. But the mood suddenly changed when Jennifer got a phone call from her brother Jens. In a low voice, Jens warned his sister to leave the island immediately before it was too late. He told her that after the plane crash, the main airport had been closed, but there was still one more airport that would have its last flight, Tenerife Airport. To get there, they needed to take a small ferry that would depart in 20 minutes from the nearest harbour. Without saying much, Jennifer quickly told Frederick. The two of them packed up with their kids and ran out of the hotel. But once they got outside, there wasn't a single taxi in sight. Time kept ticking, and their chance to survive was getting smaller. Frederick looked around and saw a car parked nearby, with the keys still hanging inside. Without thinking twice, he made a desperate decision. He took the car. He slammed the gas pedal and sped toward the harbour, while the angry owner chased after them. They finally reached the harbour just in time. But before they could get on the boat, the car owner stopped Frederick for stealing his vehicle. His wife and kids managed to get on the ferry, but Frederick was left behind, held back by the furious owner. After failing to board the ferry with his family, Frederick didn't give up. He ran to another dock, trying to find another way to get to Tenerife. There, he met a boat guard and begged to rent a boat, even a small one. But the guard refused outright. As things grew more tense, disaster sirens started blaring loudly all over the city.
Just be next. You can please.
In the distance, the mountain erupted again, spewing thick ash and flashes of fire into the sky. The government quickly made an emergency announcement, urging everyone to head to Tenerife Airport to catch the last available flight. The harbour turned into a sea of panicked people, all fighting for a spot on any remaining boat. After struggling for a while, Frederick finally managed to get a place on a small boat headed to Tenerife. Just as it was about to leave, he heard a woman screaming for help. In her arms, a baby was crying loudly. The woman begged to be let on the boat, but no one cared. Everyone was too focused on saving themselves. Frederick froze for a moment. Then, without hesitation, he gave up his own spot. He helped the woman and her baby onto the boat, making sure they were safe as it slowly pulled away from the dock. Frederick could only stand there and watch from afar, realizing he was now completely stranded on the chaotic island. Sometime later, Frederick was seen sitting in front of the police station, his body exhausted and his face full of despair. He pulled out his phone. With a heavy voice, Frederick called his wife just to say goodbye. Meanwhile, Marie was still inside the holding cell. The sound of disaster sirens could be heard even inside the prison. Her sister, unable to stand seeing Marie trapped there, recklessly stole the cell keys from the guard's desk. Her sister ran to Marie's cell and unlocked the door. Marie quickly got out, but as she turned around, another prisoner with a pleading face begged her to let him out too. After a brief hesitation, Marie decided to unlock that prisoner's cell as well. Once they got outside, they ran into Frederick, who was still sitting nearby. Frederick saw Marie and her sister running toward the harbor. Marie shouted that they were heading to the dock to escape, but Frederick shook his head. He told them all the ships had already left. There was nothing left. But suddenly Marie's sister said there was still one small boat at the west dock that hadn't departed yet. Hearing that, Frederick, who had lost all hope, suddenly regained his spirit. He stood up, looked toward the sea, and started running alongside Marie toward their last hope of surviving the massive disaster that was coming. At the same time, chaos began to erupt at the government office. Jens was still doing everything he could to find a way to save the people of La Palma, but all his efforts kept getting blocked by bureaucracy. Jens suggested to the ministers and leaders that they immediately call in an ocean wave expert to estimate the direction and strength of the possible tsunami after the eruption at La Palma. But as always, the idea was instantly rejected. The government officials seemed more afraid of being blamed than of losing lives. They worried that if the expert's prediction was wrong and the supposedly safe areas were hit by the tsunami, the administration would be seen as a total failure. Even a small mistake could turn into a huge scandal. One of the officials even said calmly, "It's better if the disaster just stops at La Palma." Meanwhile, the scene returned to Frederick, who was running as fast as he could toward the last boat with Marie and her sister. On the other side, Jennifer, Sarah, and Tobias had finally reached the entrance of the plane that would take them away from La Palma. But amid the panic, Sarah refused to board the plane. Sarah insisted on finding Charlie, the person she had just met during the vacation. Jennifer tried to stop her, explaining that Charlie couldn't come because she didn't have the special wristband ticket to board the plane. But Sarah was stubborn. She said she would give Charlie her father's wristband instead. Jennifer looked at her daughter helplessly. She knew Frederick's chances of reaching the airport were very small, so she finally allowed Sarah to go find Charlie. As all passengers were being asked to board the plane, Jennifer started to panic. Sarah still hadn't returned, while the plane was getting ready for takeoff. After waiting long enough, Jennifer finally stepped off the plane, deciding to look for her daughter. She no longer cared about the danger or the little time left. Meanwhile, the situation at the government office was heating up. Media from around the world had filled the room, ready to report how the government would handle this massive disaster. The officials sat with calm faces and pre-written statements. But before the minister could speak, Jens suddenly stood up and walked to the podium. With a loud voice, Jens interrupted and told all the media that there was a safe place near La Palma, Canaria Hill, where people could still save themselves. At the same time, Frederick had just set foot on land when the ground suddenly began to shake violently. From a distance, the mountain in La Palma erupted with a thunderous roar. The sky turned dark and ash scattered everywhere. At that moment, Frederick realized there was no way he could reach the airport in time. All the roads were destroyed, and they were running out of time. But amid the chaos, a message from Jens came through on his phone. It contained the coordinates of a safe location calculated by a wave expert. Frederick quickly opened the map, and it turned out the place wasn't too far from where he was. But there was a big problem. To get there, Frederick had to cross the sea again by boat, while the mountain had just collapsed and massive waves were surely heading toward the shore. It was a risky choice, but Frederick didn't have time to think. With determination on his face, he looked at the rough sea and whispered to Marie, "We have to try. It's the only way." Frederick then pushed the boat forward, fighting against the raging current, hoping to reach safety before the tsunami hit. Meanwhile, at the airport, the situation was just as chaotic. Sarah was finally inside the plane with her boyfriend, Charlie. But fate had other plans. Jennifer, her mother, was still outside, running around frantically searching for her daughter amid the panicking passengers. Just as Jennifer was about to give up, a call came in from Sarah. In a rushed voice, Sarah said she was already on the plane and about to leave.
Skal du bare bli, hører du ikke?
Nei, Sara, se her. Det står da.
Det kommer 21 minutter.
But time was running out. The mountain in La Palma completely collapsed, and a massive tsunami had started to form. The control tower ordered the pilot to take off immediately before it was too late. On the other hand, Jennifer also received a message from Jens telling her about the same safe location. Without thinking twice, Jennifer grabbed Tobias's hand and, accompanied by one of the airport staff, headed straight for the coordinates.
Go there.
The network is down.
Der. Bra, Tobias. Få det!
At almost the same time, Frederick was racing against the tsunami towering behind him. Jennifer was struggling to reach the safe zone, and the plane carrying Sarah was speeding down the runway. But fate had a different plan. As the plane began to accelerate for takeoff, the ground beneath the runway suddenly cracked, followed by a deafening rumble. Within seconds, a giant wave slammed into the airport, dragging the plane and hundreds of passengers with it. From a distance, Frederick and Marie could be seen finally reaching the hill, the safe zone, along with a few others. They were exhausted, their bodies soaked, but still alive. Not long after, Jennifer and Tobias also arrived, greeted by tears of relief under the grey sky. But one question still lingered. What happened to Sarah and Charlie on that plane? Unexpectedly, the two of them actually survived. Whether it was a miracle or just fate, they were found in the wreckage of the plane, stranded on the edge of a cliff, barely believing they were still breathing.
Go.
Maybe, as people say, God has his own way of teaching something, whether it's giving time to make up for mistakes or simply to remind us of the meaning of life. Sometime later, Sarah finally reached the safe zone, where her family was already waiting. They hugged each other tightly, crying in relief, even though everyone knew they had lost so much that day. And with an ending that felt strange yet peaceful, the story came to a close, filled with pain, miracles, and an unbelievable, bitter reality.